I was talking at the weekend with someone about the desire for knowing and clarity on the path, on the spiritual path, of course. And I found myself saying really that the bottom line in many ways on the spiritual path, on the path of unravelling, on the path of undoing all that has been done up falsely, or that has created this sense of us that we take to be so real, and then discover that it's not so real, and in many ways the cause of our suffering, conditions, wounds, grievances, fears, the past, the hurts, the addictions, all of these kind of things, and how then when we realise the suffering that it's all causing, how then we seek to know what to do to unravel or take them apart and see what's left and live more peacefully maybe, or more equanimously, or more richly, or more deeply, or just less stressfully, less needily, But what I was saying was that, in actual fact, let's cut to the chase. The truth is that 99% of the spiritual path is confusion. A lot of it, 99%. I'm not being, precise. I'm just using the word and the phrase 99 to convey just how confusing to the mind that seeks to know, understand, make sense of, and thus in many ways to control the journey of awakening, or the journey of realization, or the journey just of transformation, because the mind is geared towards and driven by the need to know, and therefore to control. And so the confusion is not knowing what to do. The confusion is feeling at odds with everything that's arising. The confusion is the whole of one's relationships, life, addictions, family relationships, intimate relationship, work relationship, purpose relationship, who am I relationship, the world relationship. All starts becoming very confusing, because what we believed to be true, even if we didn't know that we believed it, we were unconsciously assuming that it was all true. And the confusion is realizing that it's not true, and if that's not true, what then? What is happening here? And that's a large part of the journey. It's, the journey could be said as over time, let's say, confusion, confusion, confusion. Aha! Confusion, confusion, confusion. Ah, I see something, or I feel something. Confusion, 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 confusion. Oh God, this is never going to go away. It's never going to change. Confusion, confusion, confusion. The process of all of that confusion is the journey. It's not that in the confusion that there's something wrong. There's something right. And we have to walk through the valley of confusion. We have to walk in that place, because what's being let go of, is almost the need to know from the level of mind. The need to know from that level of belief, of certainty, of security. This is the willingness to become somewhat insecure in one's existential self. Of course, this then triggers the emotional body. And of course, and if you've watched any of my videos, I talk a lot about this. I talk a lot about, the inclusion of the emotional body, the inclusion of that nervous system aspect of us. The whole of the pain body has to come with us, because unless it's total, unless we're utterly inclusive on the journey, then we tend to get a bypassed version of whatever awakening might happen or occur or mean or be. So this confusion, as the world that we knew shakes, and everything that we assume to be real shakes, and we can't any longer rely on the mind to fix it in place, and the mind can't know. So what the heck? And it's in that what the heck over and over again, with the moments of clarity, with the epiphanies, with the ahas, with the insights, with the kind of a deeper relaxation sometime, many of these things, and then a return to the confusion, that something starts changing. You see, change in this sense, we're not talking about the flash bang of an enlightenment. We're talking about a more gradual path, the path of erosion, I would call it, the cliff face that erodes into the ocean of being. It doesn't happen in one fell swoop. It happens actually over time, just by staying on the path and being fully committed to the journey, no matter where it takes us. That's the path of the erosion. So what happens is confusion, epiphany, realization, softening, and then a return to the confusion, and then the same thing starts happening. Over that whole thing, which seems, excuse me, broken up into singular things, what happens is that something changes in us. The maturation happens. The chickpea gets cooked, if you listen to Rumi. Not listen to, if you've read any Rumi. The chickpea that's being cooked, that thinks it's being tortured by experience or by God or by life, is actually being cooked for a beautiful stew to mix with the spices to become something beautiful for the divine to eat. This is the same thing that I'm talking about here. It's the confusion. In confusion, does something get forged? Confusion itself can lead to a number of things. Resignation, of course. It can lead to a sort of, if you stay on a certain level, it can lead to a kind of panic. It can lead to, or it can lead to an existential depth, because the inquiry gets more serious. There's nothing wrong with being confused. It's actually very healthy. But of course, we live in the world of knowing. We live in the world of information and misinformation and all of that. We live in the world of mind, don't we? We live in this knowing. I know this, and everything is based on I know this, and you don't know this, and I don't know, and I need to know. And this is all valuable on a certain level in the sort of what I call the superficial world. This is all very valuable. There's no problem with that. But when it comes to the journey of self-inquiry, when it comes to the journey of a deeper spirituality, where we're seeking to know what is true about ourselves and transcend, go beyond, fall within into a more whole knowing of ourselves and of what we really are on the deeper existential, spiritual, human, our very humanity. We can't split it off, the spiritual and the human, because they're the same thing. This is about the very depth of our humanity. What are we, and what is this existence? And how can I be more true? How can I be true to what I am? And that necessitates yielding the attachment to the mind all the time. And as we yield to the attachment to the mind as the great knower or the one who needs to know, then we fall into confusion. And in that confusion, if we stay true and we stay honest and we stay real and we stay willing and we stay vulnerable and we stay humble, by and by things just change. But they don't change without confusion. And that confusion can take us into some seemingly very dark places. But in the dark places, do we discover the light? In the light places, you don't need to discover the light, apparently. But in the dark places, let's say, if you stay and you're willing, you go into the dark places and that's where you find a light. And that light is the light of beauty, of grace, of a deeper knowing. A deeper knowing. And that's the 1%. And it can't be, I talk of it this way, sort of roundabout and circular sort of metaphors and speaking in all sorts of ridiculous ways in many ways. You know, almost to try and confuse the mind out of its, out of its kind of rigid, fixed, linear way of wanting to know. That's why I do my poetry. That's why I speak poetry. Because it bypasses, or has the capacity, at least sometimes, to bypass the mind. It sort of goes into the heart, sometimes goes into the soul, goes into the spirit, goes into the deeper aspects of us. Maybe it makes somebody cry or relax, or speaks to their dream body, something like this. That's the purpose of it. But in that, mind gets confused. Soul or spirit or the deepermost is never confused. Awareness is never confused. Awareness is just awareness. So if you stay in presence, then there is no confusion. But it seems very hard to stay in presence when the rest of one's life is churning itself up. We're so attached to the self that we can't just be in presence until we can. That's also like the 1%. But don't get hooked up on my ideas of 1%, please don't. It speaks too literally. It's just a metaphor for saying, don't worry about the confusion. If there's confusion, if there's doubt, if there's all of these things that start welling up when we realize that what we thought was real is not real, and we don't know where to go, and we don't know what to do, but we know that we want it, and I want it now, but it is not coming now. The peace is not coming now until it's here. And so there has to be this almost courting of confusion without rejecting it. The confusion is in many ways a door. It's a door into the unknown. There's knowing, and then there's confusion, the doorway, and the deeper mystery. And in the deeper mystery is where we fall. And that falling into is a very beautiful thing. Very, very beautiful thing. And that's where some of the relief for the human being is. But we have to fall first. So this video is, I hope, speaking to some of that.